It's a new day, but not on Deep Space Nine. We're aboard the USS Honshu, and so are Sisko and Seagull Dukat. The latter has apparently made a full recovery from a few episodes ago, when he lost his mind along with his crown, his daughter and his freedom. Sisko's not sure how to feel about any of that, or Seagull Dukat in general, but decided to visit the brig and offer his condolences for the death of Zial. It's almost civil, so it's a shame when the ship comes under attack. A very serious one, according to Kira, back on DS9. The Honshu has been reported destroyed by some Cardigan ships, though there are survivors. We're off to search for them in the Defiant, but not for long. The Defiant is needed elsewhere in a couple of days, and it can't be postponed. Sisko and Seagull Dukat should be fine until then. Well, maybe not fine given Sisko's injuries, but at least they're alive. The almost civil conversation might have saved Sisko's life, as Seagull Dukat pulled him into a shuttle when he was injured during the attack. That shuttle managed to last long enough to land wherever the hell this place is, but it's not going anywhere else, says Seagull Dukat. On the plus side, he did salvage the emergency beacon and thinks he's got it running. He also says it's set to call anyone in range, so it could be either Federation or Dominion, which seems fair enough to Sisko. All of which, plus Seagull Dukat patching him up, leads to the obvious question of why he didn't just leave Sisko. Saying he didn't want to isn't much of an answer, but it's the only one Sisko's getting, as Seagull Dukat goes off to search for fresh food to supplement their rations. It's also to have a chat with 5th Uncle Wayoon the Creepy, who's here too apparently. He wants to know what Seagull Dukat's really doing with Sisko. Seagull Dukat's not inclined to answer or listen to suggestions of killing Sisko. Perhaps that's because 5th Uncle Wayoon's also acting like a dick to him and goading him about his mental break. Being reminded of his pathetic displays of weakness, those nights spent screaming until sedated, is enough to push Seagull Dukat over the edge, and he poops yellow at 5th Uncle Wayoon. Or, more accurately, he poops yellow at a rock, as 5th Uncle Wayoon isn't really there, and never was. Seagull Dukat making breakfast. That's the generous title we're giving to the broth containing whatever vegetation he was able to find outside, but then Sisko might not be in the mood anyway after the night Seagull Dukat says he had. He doesn't remember anything beyond feeling dizzy, though is assured it was significantly and messily more than that. Perhaps the suffering of someone else is what's put Seagull Dukat in such a good mood, though he's saying it's the sudden reversal of fortune. The universe was a dick to him the last time this happened, so being given a 50-50 prospect of rescue by his own people, rather than the Federation court that awaited him, is a distinct uptick in his luck. Sisko has no time for it, nor the attempt at being pally by asking after the inhabitants of the newly renamed Deep Space Nine. He appreciates being saved, obviously, but that doesn't mean he's going to listen to Seagull Dukat's lines about how magnanimous he was to the Bajorans this time round. As far as Sisko's concerned, he's still a complete and utter bastard. A bastard, perhaps, but a distracted one. Sisko's been watching him glance at a tunnel and asks if he's heard something. Just the wind, he's assured, but Seagull Dukat's going to take a look anyway. The tunnel contains Damar Dawson Biggs, and the fact Seagull Dukat's talking to him at all is pretty generous, what with murdering his daughter, but then I suppose not being real does make things slightly different. Maybe it's because imaginary Damar Dawson Biggs says he's trying to help by suggesting Sisko needs to die, something Seagull Dukat still declines. He needs to know he has Sisko's respect before what comes next. What Sisko has right now is a thirst, and in the process of grabbing a drink, he knocks the emergency phone. The revealed screen inside is saying something very different to the screen on the front, specifically that it's currently turned off. Sisko's back on the blanket before Seagull Dukat returns and mentions that it beeped while he was gone. Sisko suggests perhaps he should check it over fully to make sure it's all good. Seagull Dukat opens it up and pokes around before responding there's nothing to worry about, which is all Sisko needed to know about what's really going on here. Sisko's taking matters into his own hands, a little fiddling with the emergency phone using a broken fork while Seagull Dukat's elsewhere gets it working properly. He's back in bed by the time Seagull Dukat returns with cushions, all the better for a pally chat between the two of them. Well, three of them, as imaginary Kira joins in when Seagull Dukat asks what Sisko really thinks of him. Sisko starts out trying not to engage with it, though changes his mind when he notices Seagull Dukat is arguing with people who aren't there. Under the circumstances, Sisko decides maybe pacifying the armed guy who's talking to himself would be the smart option. Telling him that Sisko believes he was unfairly judged and just a soldier doing his job is going well, right up until imaginary Kira chimes in. She starts laughing and telling Seagull Dukat that Sisko is just blowing smoke up his ass. Sisko tries to pull Seagull Dukat's attention back when he starts complaining about Kira being a bitch and suggests we should just ignore her and continue talking like civilized people. Seagull Dukat wants to poop yellow at her instead and starts firing randomly around the cave. He tires of it eventually and moves to sit down, only to note the broken fork Sisko was using as a tool earlier. There's only one reason for needing it, so Seagull Dukat checks the emergency phone, then kabooms it after finding it fixed. With that firmly exploded, Seagull Dukat decides his taste for violence has not been entirely sated and starts laying into Sisko. Once it's over and Sisko has a sling to replace the now broken metal brace that was on his arm, it's naturally time for Seagull Dukat to explain why this punishment was not only necessary, but also Sisko's own fault. He's never been responsible for the things he's had to do after all, and this is no different. Placating Seagull Dukat didn't do shit, so Sisko decides he can go fuck himself. He's not going to hand Seagull Dukat absolution for this, or any of the other bloody awful things he's done. That's entirely unreasonable, thinks Seagull Dukat. He's only ever been harsh because it was necessary. When he took over the Bajoran occupation, he made their enslavement far less odious. Some of them even started surviving the forced labor camps. That Bajor continued to fight was an insult to the generosity he showed. His imaginary backing singers are all agreeing with him now, offering points to support his argument. Even imaginary Kira's agreeing the Bajorans didn't want peace. Sisko lets him monologue, giving him enough prompting to let him talk himself dry. The problem, according to Seagull Dukat, is that the Bajorans were barbarians. A civilized people would have been able to see the Cardigans were superior and cooperated. Anything that happened after their resistance was, thus, their own fault. They were victims of their own pride, and decent, honest Cardigans suffered as a result. That's why Seagull Dukat hates them. That's why he's right to hate them. That's why they all deserve to die. He should have done it when he had the chance, turned their miserable little world into glass. Pondering this new realization of his hatred for Bajor will have to wait, though, as Sisko bonks him on the noggin with the pipe he grabbed during the monologue and legs it. Seagull Dukat was lying about a lot of shit, so it makes sense that he might be lying about the shuttle, too. Sisko makes it there just as Seagull Dukat catches up with him. The ensuing wrestle doesn't last very long, not with Sisko's buggered arm. Killing him would be the easy option, but Seagull Dukat didn't go through all of this just to lose his audience now. Besides, Sisko helped him realize that Bajor deserves to be destroyed, and killing their emissary would prevent him from seeing it happen. A final attempt to stop Seagull Dukat gets in a good hit, but ultimately fails, and he scarpers in the shuttle. Back on the Defiant, we're about to give up the search. Handy then that Seagull Dukat sends out a signal, possibly to call his mates and possibly to gloat. We trace the origin and find Sisko, but Seagull Dukat is long gone. Still, at least the rescue mission was successful, and we even saved some other unnamed crew from the Honshu that nobody gives a shit about. What Sisko does give a shit about is stopping Seagull Dukat. He doesn't believe Starfleet will be successful in finding him, but we now know he'll come back to Bajor at some point and Sisko will be ready. Considering it was technically Sisko who goaded Seagull Dukat into realizing he wanted to do some more genocide, that seems only fair, so we'll leave the emissary to consider how he'll fix the problem he just ignited until the next adventure. From the very pilot episode of Deep Space Nine onwards, threats to Bajor have been a core thread of the show. In the past, they've been largely oblique: Cardigans trying to provoke a civil war to destabilize the region, the unspoken threats of a smiling Dominion, and the balancing act of trying to remain neutral, numerous anomalies or Gamma Quadrant randoms popping through every other week. Those threats have involved Bajor, but they've not really been actively targeted at it. Bajor has been either a means to an end, a juicy bonus, or an unintended potential casualty. Even the Cardigan plot to cause regime change so they can take over again was prompted by the discovery of the wormhole. This episode, then, is the first time I can think of that Bajor has been actively and deliberately threatened for who and what they are, rather than in connection to a different reason. This time it is literally personal, and the person is Seagull Dukat. You could be forgiven for watching this one and thinking it's evil for evil's sake, the I'll kill you all attitude, a step over the line into cartoon villain, but I'd argue it is in keeping with the narcissism we've been shown time and time again. Just as Seagull Dukat loved Zial because she would always return and forgive him, the same logic applies to his hatred of Bajor and its people. It's not the terrorism or the loss of Cardigan life. It's not the half a century of stoic resistance or the refusal to accept Cardigan superiority. It's not for the things they did. It's for the things they didn't do. They didn't show him the due deference he believes he truly deserves. They didn't acknowledge that he personally was better not only than them, but than his predecessors as well. I genuinely think that Seagull Dukat's responses to Bajoran acts of resistance would have been less severe if each one of them had been accompanied by a little note saying, "Sorry about this, Seagull Dukat. It's not you personally, who we really like, but just the other lot." In his mind, the great Bajoran crime wasn't resisting Cardassia, it was resisting him. He's the hero after all, and every good story tells us that anybody resisting the hero must, logically, be the villain. It's important to understand that for Seagull Dukat, this isn't revenge. It's what they deserve, and it'll be delivered with the famous refrain of abusers everywhere. "Look what you made me do." For as good as the episode is, and it is good, I do question the use of psychosis as a plot element. Whilst visually striking and narratively useful, the inclusion of imaginary characters has the potential to muddy the waters of what we're saying about evil. Seeing Seagull Dukat embracing complete genocide whilst simultaneously holding the opinion that he's the good guy would have been more potent without the potential excuse of a mental break. He didn't hallucinate when he oversaw the deaths of millions, so including the symptoms here feels a bit too close to equating his current behavior with them when we know that's not the case. He has always been this person, and associating the next logical step of his megalomaniacal narcissism with hearing voices feels like a cop-out at best and stigmatizing psychosis at worst. Moreover, it dilutes the message we've seen again and again about evil in Deep Space Nine. True evil is not obvious and overt, not maniacal laughter. True evil is mundane. True evil is the person who believes they cannot be wrong, who convinces themselves that their actions are not only necessary, but for the good of others. True evil is to believe that killing only 80% of people instead of 100% of people is not only acceptable, but actively magnanimous, and anybody who can't see that is the real problem. True evil is egocentrism to such a degree that empathy becomes impossible. Seagull Dukat has been an example of true evil many times before, and he didn't need voices in his head to get there. That being said, I accept that I'm likely in the minority with this opinion, and there's a fair argument to be made that I'm overthinking it. The job of the episode was to reinsert Seagull Dukat as a major antagonist, and it undeniably succeeds. We've also established a clear and unambiguous rivalry between him and Sisko, something alluded to previously but not outright stated. Sisko's had plenty of opponents over the seasons, but now he's got a real nemesis like what proper heroes have. Let's finish up with a look at a pair of incidental details we got from the story then. The first point for today is that the peace treaty we were discussing a couple of episodes back clearly hasn't materialized. Seagull Dukat being moved from one Starfleet facility to another is unlikely to include crossing over Cardigan territory, so we'll assume the attack was after an incursion into ours. Perhaps the suggestion of accepting a peace treaty from the Dominion was reconsidered after Bashir and his mates also recommended surrendering. The second and final point for today is that Seagull Dukat was being held by Starfleet prior to him being tried as a war criminal. That raises the question of what exactly he's being charged with, and it's surprising to realize there may not be as many options as you'd expect. The obvious one is starting a war, but that's far from easy to prove. It's not like he attacked a Federation outpost. The hot section of this war might have kicked off with the Cardigans and Jem'Hadar popping over to Deep Space Nine, but that was after Bajor, who actually owned the place, registered a formal complaint about Starfleet not handing it back over to them. The whole area is grey from a legal perspective, and that's without Kira and the Bajoran government formally welcoming Seagull Dukat to the station after Sisko buggered off. This, of course, as if you're even willing to call that the first act of war, as there was the business with Starfleet and Klingons kabooming a Cardigan shipyard going on at the same time, if you recall. Exactly who started all of this might have been a topic of some debate when it reached the courts. Another possibility to level at Seagull Dukat is how Cardassia acted during hostilities, but that might not be so simple either. The Nuremberg trials after World War II were fraught with problems, and that was with members of the same species using agreed international law. Well, mostly, but we're not here to talk about retroactive application of new laws. The point is that such things are far from certain, and that was with a clear example of who was the aggressor. Starfleet might struggle to claim they were the defenders after the shipyard attack we mentioned above. The potential quagmire of all this is at least fitting in a way. Much of Kira's earlier characterization in the show was displaying how the move from war to peace was not a simple or painless task. Seeing how the same logic could be applied on a large scale to even the Federation shows that the fight doesn't necessarily end at the same time as the shooting. End of episode.
So, this is part of the GeoCity, is it?
Looks that way, aye.
I ask because it looks like a stock photo of a back alley.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
I can't help but note it's not exactly a welcoming back alley either.
It does carrying into nefarious deeds, doesn't it? Still, we should give it a chance.
A chance to do what? Steal our kidneys?
I'm just saying, we don't know anything about this place or who lives here, so we should stop being negative and find out more.
We're going to get stabbed, aren't we?
Probably, yeah. Woof.